Welcome to today's meetings. I would now call on Pastor Dan to say prayers, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I want to wish you all a very Merry Christmas, and just to remind you that just as a small token and a way of us saying thank you on behalf of City Life and the Christian community, we put together a Thursday evening Christmas dinner, which you are all you're all welcome to come along to. You're all invited to that. The deadline for that is midnight tonight, so if you want to come along, please do let. It's Christmas dinner at 7 o'clock. On Thursday, this Thursday coming. So so this is with the Lord Mayor. So let's pray. Father God, we just want to thank you for this time gathering together. We just want to commit this meeting into your hands. We pray for our government. We pray for our nation at this time, that you would give us wisdom and insight and understanding, that you would help this country navigate through this difficult season, and we pray that ultimately that your will be done. Father God, we pray, let your kingdom come, let your will be done on earth, in Portsmouth as it is in heaven. And Lord, we just pray that you would direct and guide this meeting, and we pray that there be a positive and fruitful outcome for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you very much, Pastor Dan. Thank you very much, Pastor Dan. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but quite understand if you have other things to do. Please be seated, everyone. Yeah. Moving on to agenda item 1, declarations of interest. Members, if you have any disclosable pecuniary interests or personal prejudicial interests to declare any items on the agenda before us, can you please indicate? No. Minutes. It's proposed by Councillor Vernon Jackson, seconded by Councillor Jones, that the minutes of the council meeting held on the 13th of November 2018, previously circulated with the agenda, be confirmed as a correct record. Are the minutes agreed? And communications, I have apologies from Councillor Jay Hooper and Stephen Morgan. In addition, Councillor Elcombe has advised that he may be arriving a little late. Is there any more? Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Both Councillor Fazackerley and Councillor David Fuller will be a little late as they're held up at work.
Thank you much. Councillor Jones.
Thank you much, Lord Mayor. Councillor Ryan Brent is arriving imminently.
Thank you much. And Councillor New.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Councillor Neil Young will be arriving after 4 o'clock.
Thank you much. Okay, filming council proceedings. Just a reminder, all of the microphones are controlled by me. A bit of a power freak. Members wishing to speak may simply either press the button on your screen, which will illuminate on my screen, and you'll have a little green glow to tell you that you're waiting. Or if you fail to grasp that, you are able to wave at me frantically, and I'll also take note of you. When I call you to speak, I'll also turn off your microphone at the end of your allotted time. The cameras for the webcast will go to the speaker, unless the speaker is a member of the public, in which case they will be heard, but they will not be seen. Please don't shout into the microphones, the proximity mics, so it'll be easier for people to be able to hear you if you're a short distance away from it. And members of the public speaking, they'll be called at the relevant time, and the camera will show a general view of the members in the parlour. Voting is this: we will have the online viewers, a webcast camera will take an overview of members in the chamber when any voting takes place. And for the attention of these members of the public wishing to record proceedings, the council rules prohibit the filming, photographing or recording of members of the public unless they're addressing the meeting, and only then if they do not actively object. Filming from gallery to gallery is also prohibited. And if we need to evacuate, the assembly point for this meeting is King Henry I Street by the University building in front of the ice, due to the ice rink in front of the building taking up the Guildhall Square. I now move on to item 4, deputations from the public, and hand over to the City Lawyer.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Members, there are 2 deputations received for this meeting. Details have been circulated in the chamber. The first deputation is to be from Mr. Alan Deputeer Unison Stewart to make his deputation on item 7. You will have 6 minutes. The bell will go when there is 1 minute to go, and then again at the end of your time. Mr. Tier.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm here because Portsmouth City Unison branch is concerned about the proposed closure of Edinburgh House and Hilsey Lodge care homes and wishes to object to the associated £500,000 cut in funding to the health, wellbeing and social care portfolio that's going to be discussed today. There's talk about a lack of demand. Well, the report justifying the closure of the care homes states that one of the factors leading to the recommendation is a lack of demand for bed spaces. However, this doesn't tally with information we have received from our members working in adult social care who have told us that they are often searching desperately for beds for their clients in care homes at local authority rates. This results in people having to remain in hospital or at home for longer than is safe or reasonable. This is increasing pressure on local NHS services including QA and specialist mental health units. This has resulted in people having to go outside of the authority and pay an increased rate to find appropriate and adequate placements. There have been a number of closures of private care homes in Portsmouth, resulting in very high cost placements of up to £1,200 a week due to the lack of availability. Adult social care staff who have contacted Edinburgh House and Hilsey Lodge over the past 8 or so months have been told they cannot accept new referrals. Both homes used to offer dedicated respite facilities, but this has been withdrawn, which has led to further pressure on families and increased occurrence of crisis situations, which is then dealt with by Portsmouth City Council. The cost of placements, we do not accept that other council homes have capacity to take on the increasing number of clients requiring dementia specialist care, and feel it is inevitable that by closing Edinburgh House and Hilsey Lodge, there will be an increase in council-funded private sector placements. Although at face value, private placements may look more cost-effective at this time, the reality is that families end up having to pay significant top-ups, putting further financial and emotional pressure on those families. By reducing beds available in council homes, the effect on supply and demand of such beds within our city will give private providers the power and opportunity to abuse their market position by increasing charges, putting prices up across the sector and nullifying the presently construed cost savings. In regards to facilities, the report talks about Hilsey Lodge and Edinburgh House lacking the physical and social amenities for the current market. However, in the private sector, this is also not the reality. Those on local authority rates could be sharing rooms, which would not happen in council-run homes. A lot of the private homes are in converted Victorian buildings, which are significantly less adaptable than the purpose-built council care homes at Edinburgh House and Hilsey Lodge, and more often than not, lack the availability of outside spaces beyond courtyard gardens, and many of which have already been shrunk due to the expansion of original buildings. The council has a market leadership role in setting standards and prices for the local private sector. By scaling back public sector provision, it is for profit providers who will fill the gap, driving up costs and quality down. In terms of staffing ratios mentioned in the report, the homes have not recruited to permanent positions for a period of time, which has led to increasing use of agency staff, pushing up costs. Underinvestment in proper staffing has led to a situation where homes have been under-resourced and received poor CQC reports. The turnaround team have been working in Edinburgh House for the past year and have succeeded in bringing it up to necessary standard at significant cost. So why go to such lengths and expense to the public purse only to then close it down? Staffing and the care charters, social care workers provide dedicated service to some of our most vulnerable friends, family and neighbours, while receiving some of the poorest wages in the public sector. Unison has long campaigned for decent treatment of social care workers and high quality services for people that use them. More and more local authorities are signing up to Unison's Ethical Care Charter and Residential Care Charter, which seeks councils to commit to nothing more basic than decent pay for quality work, protecting and supporting service users, and giving staff the time and resources they need to provide a high standard of care. We strongly encourage the council to demonstrate its respect for the dedication of social care workers and to provide dignity for its service users by adopting the charters and implementing their recommendations. So in conclusion, Ultimately, the proposed care home closures are about making cuts to local services, not remodelling services in the interests of service users. We can invest in commercial property around the country in the interest, seeing the return on that investment as beneficial to our council. So why can't we invest money on bringing existing social care facilities here in Portsmouth up to decent standard in the knowledge that investment will be beneficial to our community and the people this council serves? Having council-run care homes is about setting the standard for social care in Portsmouth, ensuring choice and availability for service users and their families, and essentially maintaining democratic oversight into the service needed by our most vulnerable residents. We call on full council to oppose the proposed savings from the health, wellbeing and social care portfolio that, if passed, will result in the closure of these care homes, and invite the council to enter into meaningful discussions with Unison over how Portsmouth's social care system can continue to develop in the best interests of social care workers and service users and their families. So thank you for your time and hopefully for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Burgess, may I now ask you to make your deputation? You have 6 minutes. The buzzer will go when there's 1 minute left, and then again at the end of your time.
Sorry, press that. Okay. Board member to have this deputation. I understand there was some miscommunication about my notification. So, we now have a Lib Dem-led administration. The Lib Dem constitution states, the Liberal Democrats exist to build and safeguard a fair, free and open society in which we seek to balance the fundamental values of liberty, equality and community, and in which no one is enslaved by ignorance, poverty or unconformity. I live in a community enslaved by poverty, Charles Dickens Ward. Portsmouth City Council Public Health Annual Report 2016 highlights that life expectancy is near 10 years lower than more affluent wards. The toxic mix of substance misuse, mental ill health and domestic abuse are analysed as to the cause of this drop in life expectancy. 8,380 children growing up in poverty, 19.6% of all children in Portsmouth. Charles Dickens Ward, 1,760 out of 4,410 children are in poverty. 40%, 11,052 out of 90,169 households in Portsmouth are in fuel poverty, which is 12.3%, much higher than the South East average of 9%. The onslaught of austerity has had a devastating impact on the Charles Dickens residents. The impact of universal credit and the loss of local services is a double whammy. The council has thrown 108 million into risky speculative scams. Much of the money has gone into commercial high street operations. Waitrose in Somerset, 13.2 million. Matalan in Swindon, 9.7 million. Mercedes-Benz in Eastleigh, 8.75 million. Travis Perkins in Leicestershire, 15.7 million. Little and Dunelm, 8.3 million. This at a time when money markets are predicting another recession and hedge fund speculators are betting against the retail sector. If the council has 108 million in its control, if it is sincere in its argument that nobody should be enslaved by poverty, then there is a radical idea. Invest in the people of Pompey. By reducing poverty, you can save money. Investing in people empowers them, develops skills, and enables them to become resilient and independent. Once there was Sure Start, then became stay and play groups. Now they're called family hubs. They used to be funded and run by trained, experienced professionals. for many years. Now they are run by volunteers, parents who regularly attend the group and received a few weeks' training. What we are witnessing is the steady, systematic retreat of the whole public sector provision. The neoliberal madness that caused the bankers' recession is ruling the roost in Portsmouth. You choose to put council money into risky schemes and systematically refuse to support the people living in Portsmouth. Shame on you.
That brings us to an end. That brings us to an end of the deputations for today. May I ask that if you wish to stay for the rest of the meeting and to watch it, if you retire to the public gallery. Thank you.
I've not been notified of any appointments for this meeting under item 5. Councillor Ryan Brent, do you have any interests to declare? No. Thank you much. In which case, moving on, there's no urgent business has been received within the time period for today. And so moving on swiftly to Cabinet item 7, to receive and consider the recommendations of the Cabinet regarding the revenue budget savings proposal. Members, the recommendations of the Cabinet, which met on the 4th December, have been previously circulated. They are also attached to the green sheet for ease of reference. The relevant budget report was circulated within the Council agenda. Further to the letter of 3rd of December on the procedure for dealing with this budget meeting and the budget debate, I'll now call the minute number relating to the Cabinet recommendations, pausing for any member objections. If there are no objections, the recommendations will be approved in accordance with Standing Order 28. If the item is objected to, it will be presented for debate. I now call minute 67, Revenue Budget 2019-20 Savings Proposals. Councillor Jones, are you
Object.
Object. Thought that might happen. As objections have been raised, the Leader of the Council, Councillor Vernon Jackson, will need to move the Cabinet's recommendations on the revenue budget. Just to remind members, the speaking limit does not apply to group leaders on the revenue budget item. I'm sure you're all pleased with that. Leader, I now call on you to move the Cabinet's recommendations with a seconder.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Before doing so, I understand, well, I think we might need, because the Labour Group have asked Judith Smythe to speak on their behalf, we may need to suspend standing orders to allow that, and I'm happy to propose that to happen. It seems to me it's for them to decide who they want to speak. But somebody will have to tell me when that happens. Lovely, okay. Fine. So, my Lord Mayor, I'm happy to propose the savings as set out in the agenda, and I think my deputy will be seconding them. At which point I think I'm down to speak. Is that correct, my Lord Mayor? Yes. That's all you want to say. My Lord Mayor, again it's my duty to present the first part of the administration's proposals to balance the budget for the next financial year. Our duty is to provide a budget that balances, is legal, protects services and meets the aspirations of residents of the city. The overall budget is based on 4 key components: the savings needed to meet the budget forecast, any proposals for additional growth spending, the capital budget and the setting of the council tax rates. Officially, we're only looking at the first of these things today, but in reality the proposals here address 3 of the 4 areas. The savings proposals here meet the forecast that the finance team has set us to balance the budget, and based on a council tax rise of 2.99%, personally I prefer to call it 3%, to cover inflation, along with a 1.5% rise specifically for adult social care. There are no proposals for additional money for departments, so the third area is covered. So the final piece of the jigsaw is the capital programme that we'll look at in February. This budget proposal is based on 4 things. The first is that we'd listen to local residents. Secondly is that we'd care for the most vulnerable in society. The third, that we'd run the council's finances in a competent way. And finally, we're open to ideas from others about what should be in the budget. The Lib Dem manifesto was headlined Listening, Caring and Competent, and I'm pleased with the work that we've carried out over the last 7 months while we've been in administration builds on that commitment. My Lord Mayor, the City Council has been served for many years by competent council officers who've looked after the finances of the council well. Having been in opposition for 4 years, it's been good to listen to the advice from Chris Ward, Julian Pike and David Williams on ways that the budget process has been improved over the years, and we've been happy to learn from this. As always, I'd like to record my thanks to Chris and Jules for the professional way in which they've handled the budget. I'd also like to place on record my thanks to each and every person who works here at the City Council. They are a hard-working and committed team who put the interests of the city first, and I am enormously grateful to each and every person who works for the City Council for what they do. My Lord Mayor, there are 2 ways in which any council leader's budget can be delivered. The first is a rallying call to the faithful, and the second is a business-like way that recognises that work needs to be done and looks for common ground with others. Over the last 7 months, I hope people have seen the administration has chosen the second route. Almost nobody across all the parties coming into local government want to cut services and to make things more difficult for local residents. Given the choice, almost none of us would want to look at making any cuts at all. But we have to live in the real world. If there is a change of government and money flows out of Westminster to this council, I will work hard to find useful ways to spend that money. But we have to live in the real world where we have to set a budget that is legal and balanced, and I will not be recommending to councillors that we set an illegal budget. But, my Lord Mayor, it is essential to say that the level of cuts we've seen to council budgets has gone far too far and is having serious effects on services here. It would be easy for me to say that the cuts since 2015 have been savage, but ignore the period before. But I won't. Since 2011, this council has lost £78 million of government funding, and the level of cuts we've seen is too great. We cannot pretend that the huge reductions in youth service have not had an effect on the number of children who've come into the care system at a huge financial cost, and also to the harm of those young people and their families. We cannot pretend that the introduction of universal credit has not led to homelessness. We cannot pretend that the government cuts to funding for adult social care has not led to an increase in pressure on the NHS. We cannot meekly keep quiet about these cuts. Some reductions probably were necessary in the national interest to save us from financial meltdown in 2010. But the cuts have gone on for far too long, and this city has suffered more than most. We need a campaign in a united way against cuts to our schools, to our health service, and to what remains of government funding for our youth services and social services. The total mess of Brexit will have serious consequences for this city. We'll have to see if we can weather them, but so far the government's inability to put the national interest above party interest fills me with foreboding. At this point, I need to say that whatever the mess the government has made about having a Brexit vote today, I will not attack Stephen Morgan for not being here today. In my view, he has taken the right decision to be in Westminster today and when such nationally important decisions are being made. My Lord Mayor, the decisions in this budget have been based on listening. Councillors from the administration and council officers have been out to venues across the whole of the city to listen to the views of residents, and the results speak for themselves. The number of people who completed the consultation this year is as many as in the last 2 years combined. We've gone out to communities, asked people their views and listened to them. They've said they wanted to protect services to children, and we've listened to them. Children's social care has faced no cuts and the education has been protected. They said they wanted backroom services at the council to take the largest hit of savings, and that's what's happened. There are unpleasant and difficult proposals in the papers before us, but to protect the most vulnerable in our society, our children, we're having to make these tough decisions. But we've tried to do this in a way that is financially competent. We've done this by finding 93% of the savings proposed here from efficiency savings and from increases in income. Just 7% of the proposals come from service reductions. So these proposals are about being a listening, caring and competent council, just as he said in the election in May in our manifesto. My Lord Mayor, I'd like to tell you a little about what's gone on in each service area in the city. Children's social care must be first because it looks after the most vulnerable. It's also looking at a major overspend this year. The budget in this area has been overspent in each of the last 4 years and is overspent in many councils across the country. The number of looked after children has risen by 133 over the last 5 years, and that's a 42% rise. And it's a major pressure on budgets. The recognition by Ofsted that the service offered here in this city is a good service is very welcome. But there is a lot of work that needs to be done to make the budget sustainable. I'm pleased that people too are working with us to try to do this. If we can get more children who come into care back living with their families, this reduces costs, but it's also good for the young people. In Portsmouth, our figures for getting children reunited with their families is way below the average. If we can get just 50 children back home quicker, this can help sort out the overspend. This is some of the work that Rob Wood is doing with his team. And we are also realistic about looking to increase the budget for children's social care from the £650 million announced nationally by the government. 2.4 million of that will come to Portsmouth and has been provided for social services, but we need to think about this both in terms of children's social services and adult social services to cover the rises in the national living wage. We welcome the extra funding, but it's nowhere near enough to cover the pressures in these two services. There has been a proposal that we give care leavers a 100% reduction in their council tax. This is a suggestion we support, but we need to work out the details. What happens to a care leaver from Portsmouth who doesn't live in Portsmouth now? What happens to a care leaver who does live in Portsmouth but wasn't in care to Portsmouth City Council? We've got to work out these details, and I've suggested to Stephen Morgan that we meet to talk about this at the end of the week when the madness in Westminster will have finished. We hope. Okay, I might be hopeful. In education, we can all see the huge pressures there have been in demand for special educational needs provision. Susie Horston has impressed me hugely with her hard work in her programme to visit almost all the schools in Portsmouth. I know she's respected as a knowledgeable professional by head teachers across the city who've welcomed her support for them. I'm pleased we've been able to protect the children's budget in these proposals and to step in where needed to sort out problems in schools. Adult social care has caused worries for councils across the country for many, many years. The government's decision to cut funding to adult social care but pump money into the NHS just screams to me unjoined up thinking. The two need to be thought as one, otherwise people will not get the support they need at home and then they'll become emergency admissions at QA. In the whole of Hampshire, I think Portsmouth has the best level of integration between the NHS and social care. I'm pleased we're building on this to make 3 posts joint posts. The Director of Adult Social Care, the Director of Children's Services, the Director of Public Health will soon all be joint NHS council posts. I look forward to the time when Portsmouth and even the whole of the rest of South East Hampshire that we have an integrated care model. I'm pleased that you overspend in reducing. There's a plan to bring this in line. My thanks to Matt Winnington, Innes Richards and all the team for this. I've known that there's been concern about some of the proposals for the change in residential homes. In this proposal, we're looking to provide a new facility at on the Edinburgh House site to provide extra care beds for elderly residents, particularly those with dementia. The proposals will see a 30-bed home closed down and replaced with a 50-bed home of extra care sheltered accommodation. Plans for Hilsey Lodge will also receive a replacement of the current facility, and we're looking at another extra care home on that site as well. This is part of a long-standing policy of moving the provision of extra care housing that gives residents their own flat instead of being in an institution. In care terms, it's the right thing to be done, as residents have told us time and again. It's about treating them with respect. And to address the particular concerns for people from Unison, who may not now be here, they've gone, well, even so. We've had a gradual policy of moving residential homes over to extra care sheltered accommodation, and that's been a success over many years. I think we're in a very different position to Southampton because we will retain council-owned residential care homes in Portsmouth. We've got significant under-occupation at Harry Sopnick House, so we've got 50 empty beds at Harry Sopnick House. And there is, it seems to me, this is whatever the financial contribution it's making to the savings. We should be doing this because this is about providing modern extra care for local residents. It actually is about, for me, treating residents with respect when they've got dementia. We've tried this time and again, and it's worked. I remember well a gentleman who had run the campaign to save Caroline Lodge in Portsmouth. And he ran a great petition. I saw him a while later, and he'd moved into Brunel House, the extra care shelter provision. And I was doing something else for him because he wanted to send his medals back to the government because he was cross with the government for something. And I had to arrange for him to go up to Downing Street to hand his medals back. And when I went to see him, he said, "Gerald, the best thing you ever did was to ignore me, because this is so good and much better than I had at Caroline Lodge." Now I think that's a really useful piece of feedback from a resident who had the new provision and saw something better. Now I hope that we'll all be able to work together to see if we can find ways of reassuring people that the extra provisions that we're talking about providing on those two sites will actually make the care provision available in this city a better care provision, irrespective of the finances. In transport, we clearly need to make major strides to reduce air pollution in the city, so that the damage we now know that comes from air pollution can be stopped. This will mean some difficult decisions, and I'm grateful to Lynn Stagg and all her team for moving us in the right direction. We've kept our manifesto commitment to listen to residents about their wishes about residents' parking, and I had the courage to say we will do what local residents want. Again, good progress is being made towards the provision of demand-led public transport to meet our commitment to create a replacement for dial-a-ride. The economic development of the city is key to our city's future, particularly in the uncertain world of Brexit. We face the real prospect that we'll have to concrete over large areas of the firing range at Tipner to provide emergency parking for lorries trying to export British goods abroad. I deeply regret that the Department of Transport have chosen not to work with this council in thinking about the preparations needed. The Chief Constable, as chair of the Local Resilience Forum, wrote to the department in August asking for assistance and has heard nothing since. A UK strategy based purely on thinking about Dover and clogging up the whole of the M20 with trucks just will not work. Our ferry port carries over 250,000 lorries a year between the UK and Europe. If turnaround times for ferries double or triple, we're all in for traffic nightmares. Ben Dowling's worked with his team to bring in more jobs and think through the steps that are needed to protect our city from the worst government mistakes on Brexit are very valuable. We just have to be ready, and I'm very grateful for all the work on the Brexit Standing Board has done recently. I understand the civil servant who attended had only just been appointed, and this yet again shows the lack of preparedness from government. I'm therefore proposing that we create a cross-party group to work on preparedness for Brexit. It's not to debate whether Brexit is a good thing or a bad thing, just to get us ready. And I'll invite group leaders and the spokesman for Planning, Regeneration and Economic Development to join this group. Outside the joys of Brexit, the work the team have done to introduce 50,000 more trees in the city is really welcome. The backroom services that keep the City Council going are vital to the whole of Portsmouth City Council, and I'm very grateful for the commitment and level of detailed work that Jeanette Smith has brought to this role. We're currently consulting on the reduction in the number of directors who work in this area, and the intention is to reduce the number by 2. We now have a unified senior management team, all reporting to the Chief Executive, and encouraged to work together as a single team. We're seeing reductions in spend reduced across the support services, but the quality of work to empower our staff and the voluntary sector together has been truly impressive. One of the key commitments on entering office was to try to look to reduce homelessness in the city. Various councillors like Councillor Steve Pitt, Judy Smythe, Luke Stubbs, Hugh Mason and Steve Weems have a long record of work with the homeless. The work that Darren Sanders and the team have brought in this area, along with a cross-party working group, is seeking to look for real change. I'm pleased to announce that following the adoption of the income generation paper by the City Council, we'll be looking at ways to invest in buying properties across the city to provide housing for people who are homeless. A year ago, we suggested investing with local churches through Hope into Action, but this was voted down by the previous administration. Now I hope to see around £1 million invested into making street homelessness in this city a thing of the past. Recycling and making our streets cleaner and tidier is an area where Dave Ashmore has been working hard on, and the rollout of the black wheelie bins across the city has been a success, and it's now really noticeable that streets that have these are so much cleaner and tidier on bin days. I'm really pleased that the initial results are showing that the amount of recycling taking place across the city is going up because of this change. Dave is also looking at bringing community-run cafe and public loos into College Park and Kingston Rec. The number of community wardens has been increased, and we can keep our commitment to keep rubbish collections in Portsmouth a weekly service, unlike almost every other local council in this area. The Sea Defence's consultation has shown local citizens there is a way of defending their homes without wrecking the seafront. A series of great achievements by Dave Ashmore and the team that he leads. Finally, to the fun stuff. Although I have been told that Steve Bailey does look after the coroner's office, so there's been proposal that we might need to change his title to the Director of Culture, Leisure and Death. It's essential that the city is a fun place to live in and visit. The great progress made with Victorious, with the historic dockyard and all the free events across the city, is a great tribute to the work Steve Pitt and all the team have put in. Let's not be under any illusions. More and more councils are setting budgets that remove almost all the discretionary spend on libraries, on museums, on music and the arts. We're not in that place, and Steve Pitt and Steve Bailey, there are two able champions for the quality of life. It's also been good to see the city lead the way in the commemorations for the end of World War I. The boards on many roads, the illumination of the Guildhall and the work by Pompey Pals to mount a Guard of Honour were all to be commended. So, my Lord Mayor, over the last 7 months, this administration has worked hard to make real changes for the better for this city. And I'd like to pay tribute to the councillors from all groups who've worked hard for the good of the city. If we work together, we're stronger. I don't think that any one group has a monopoly on wisdom, and I'm open to the views of everyone. At the beginning of this budget process, I wrote to all councillors from all parties to ask for their views. If colleagues here have ideas that they think would make better than the ones we've submitted, I'm really happy to look at these to see if we can improve what our proposals have been. We're open to views of all, but I would request that we need to move on with the budget proposal. We meet in December to make decisions on savings so we can get the full year effect of these proposals. If we delay the decisions till February, then it'll be more difficult to get the full year savings from some of these proposals, so we'd have to look at some additional savings in our February meeting. If there are ideas from others today that make good sense, we're happy to look at these and see how they can be added to the budget. These suggestions, my Lord Mayor, are a series of sensible suggestions, with 93% of the savings coming from extra income and from internal efficiencies. I've watched with alarm the descent of Northamptonshire County Council into meltdown, and the decision in East Sussex just to provide the statutory minimum of services. We're a long way away from that, and all councillors, employees of the City Council, should be proud of that. The budget is a budget based on listening to local residents, to caring for the most vulnerable and being competent with City Council money, and I beg to move the recommendations, my Lord Mayor. This is a budget I think we can all be proud of, and I hope we will all support. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. I'll just wait for Councillor Fuller and Councillor Fazackley to join us. Also, do either of you have any interest you wish to declare?
Good afternoon, Lord Mayor, members. Very sorry I'm late due to work commitments. No declarations of interest.
Thank you much.
Basically the same. Apologies, work delayed me. My only interest are obviously in today's jolly goings on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now call on the leader of the Conservative Group, Councillor Jones, to respond without a time limit. Any amendments will need to be proposed and seconded and then given to me in writing before the amendment is discussed further or put to the meeting.
Do it at the end. Good afternoon, Lord Mayor, members of the City Council. Today I'll be proposing to you the Conservative Group's financial proposals, our revenue budget amendment for the financial period covering the 1st of April 2019 to the 31st of March 2020. Today I'm going to formally propose on behalf of the Conservative Party in Portsmouth a number of things, and they are a citywide parking referendum to ease the parking woes of hard-working Portsmouth families, a move to 4 yearly elections in order to prevent a gross waste of public money, the creation of a new High Street Fund to support events in order to drive up footfall and protect small, independent traders, the creation of new additional public toilets, something that we see as an essential lifeline for people wanting to enjoy their home city, and a way to tackle street litter, in particular dog fouling, having listened to hundreds of residents across the city over the last 12 months. We're also going to put forward a way to protect the sports pitch cuts and to also boost the planning service. Before setting out our amendment in detail, I'm going to comment on the overall financial position of the City Council and the Liberal Democrats' response to it. Today, as we know, we are asked to consider ways to reduce the council's spending by £4 million a year. Now, there are three main ways to do this. We can either reduce services, i.e. cut public spending. We can drive forward efficiencies, the same for less, or we can go out and generate new income. Over the last 4 years, what the Conservative administration achieved was outstanding. We were able to manage down overspends, significantly improve services such as elderly care assessment waiting times, which, on the 3rd of June 2014, when we inherited the administration of the City Council, elderly people were waiting over 100 days for their care assessment packages. In May this year, May the 15th, when we handed the reins back over to the Liberal Democrats, elderly people were waiting just 20 days for their care assessment package. In doing this, we improved the services and therefore the lives of the most vulnerable in this city, and now those improvements are being reversed under this Liberal Democrat administration. Overspends in adults and children's social care are at almost £10 million, double what they were just 209 days ago when the Conservative administration ceased and the Liberal Democrats took over. That's an increase in spending beyond what the Council can afford of £23,923.45 per day. Even now, as we conduct this meeting, this Council is significantly living beyond its means. Now, if we had a plan of how to manage the runaway train that is children's social care spending, or we had a strategic approach of how to turn around adult social care, I would be less concerned. But the Liberal Democrats don't have those answers. In fact, there will be members of their group sat in this chamber right now that are hearing this information for the first time. They will be unaware of the significant risk that this out-of-control administration are putting the council in and the exact level of risk they are taking with people's lives. Service standards are slipping, in particular planning. It's in chaos. I'm receiving complaints weekly about cases being refused under delegated authority simply because they are out of time, with no offer of an extension, or cases being refused without the planning officer offering the applicant the opportunity to a minor adjustment, such as a window height or to recess a balcony. Now, whilst this sounds as if it's a criticism of the planning department, in fact it isn't, it's a plea. These people are significantly understaffed. They have been without a manager for months and are carrying individual caseloads in excess of 20. This is not good enough. They are now carrying multiple vacancies, most positions of which they have been out to 2 rounds of interviews on, and they still haven't recruited. We have just had yet another resignation from a planning officer, meaning that we will be working at or under around 60% of capacity in that department. The wheels are falling off the bus, and in spite of this, with standards at their worst in decades or possibly ever, in this budget today, the Liberal Democrats offer up a planning officer post. And I'm disappointed, Lord Mayor, because I think there should be an increase in this budget and not a cut. It's a bad decision, and that's why, in the Conservative amendment, we will be reversing that cut of £40,000. Last year, as I addressed this chamber, as leader of the City Council, I addressed the technical and legal position of the city in setting its budget. Today, this is something we are compelled to do. For those that don't know, the council carries revenue reserves year on year. It's a bit like a savings account. Over the last 4 years, under our watch, we added money to the revenue reserves to ensure we had a fallback position. In February 2015, the first Conservative adopted budget in decades, the revenue reserves were at 13.5 million. Today, before this budget is adopted, the revenue reserve pot we have is 20 million. The Lib Dems, every year we added money into our revenue reserve pot. How did we do this? Because we significantly improved service delivery through efficiencies and we generated new income. This allowed us to run a tight ship and keep the financial affairs of the council in order. Today, what you see is a proposal of a significant reduction of the revenue reserves of some 4.5 million to balance the books of the overspends, plus potentially the cost of winding up Victory Energy. When you factor in both costs, this could diminish the revenue reserve pot to 12.5 million. And that's below where it was 4 years ago when we took over the running of the council, when it was at 13.5 million. Now, this would not happen if the Conservatives were running this council. The government sets a minimum reserve limit based on the size of the council and the number of statutory services, the risks it carries. The revenue reserve is there to protect against mounting financial risks, the unknowns, and that is what the Liberal Democrats are using it for. So you might ask, well, what is the issue? For us, the issue is the lack of acknowledgement or potentially the lack of understanding of the financial issues that are growing by the day. People sat in this chamber that are blissfully unaware of the severity of the issues. An executive out of its depth, with no ideas and no forward planning, incompetent even, allow you to make up your own mind on that point, Lord Mayor. Running councils when budgets are growing is easy, but managing a huge organisation such as this, whilst having to be inventive, entrepreneurial even, is not something that comes easy to many. Last year, as well as talking about the legal and financial positions of the council, I gave an update, as I had over the previous years, on the administration's income generation strategy. The reason I did this was the huge importance it played in offsetting spending reductions. This is an area which also gives us serious cause for concern. Over the last 6 months, the Liberal Democrats have proved that they say one thing and then they do another. Because for 4 years, we were castigated for the property investment portfolio, with the leader of the council, Councillor Vernon Jackson, saying things such as, it's a misuse of public money, the Tories shouldn't be buying property around the UK, they should be investing in Portsmouth. The Lib Dem shadow cabinet member at the time, Councillor Lee Hunt, having said that they should be using this money to build council homes, and it's about getting your priorities right. And he was insistent that it was legal to borrow money to build council homes through the general fund, even if the income wouldn't cover the borrowing costs. And that was over a 20-year period. So today, as a Democrat, I'm disappointed I should say, on behalf of Liberal Democrat voters, not to have these Liberal Democrat pledges fulfilled, because that people who voted Liberal Democrat in this city did so because they didn't want the council to continue the property investment portfolio, as eloquently put by Councillor Vernon Jackson. One gentleman at a Christmas fair last week told me that during the election he was approached by a Liberal Democrat on the doorstep, and they told him that what the Tories were doing was in fact illegal. So worried was he by this that he wrote to the council to check. The reply came shortly after the election, and it stated clearly that we were not acting in an illegal way. I was lied to, he said to me, and I'm not happy. This is commonplace amongst those that voted for the Lib Dems, who are shocked and dismayed that they are not selling the commercial property acquired around the country by the Conservatives as they proposed, but instead are sitting back now and lavishing in the profits that we generated, in spite of their moral objection to them. Reprehensible. But in terms of income generation, I'm delighted, Lord Mayor, that property investment portfolio is generating over £8 million a year. And we know that the majority of that income is going on those vulnerable children from Charles Dickens Ward and those elderly people across the city that can't pay for their own care. So as a Conservative, I stand here and say to you that I'm proud of the property investment portfolio, and if we could go back and do it again, we absolutely should do. Exactly the same as the largest commercial sponsorship deal this council has ever created, the sponsorship of the Spinnaker Tower. £750,000 a year. And I'm looking forward to seeing the Liberal Democrat alternative proposal, which surely they must have already started renegotiating, as that deal comes to an end in just over 18 months' time. These are significant amounts of money, and if they are not replicated, they will create a hole in the budget. We've worked hard using the business acumen of the Conservative administration to make sure that short-sighted cuts, such as the disastrous 2014 Close the Toilets campaign by the Lib Dems, doesn't happen again. In fact, as I said earlier, we have plans to build more toilets across the city, adding to the vibrant place that we live and work. In our budget amendment, we have set aside money for the opening of extra brand new public toilets. This is a big priority for members of the public, and we are committed to ensuring that the frail and the elderly in our community are served properly and not kept as prisoners in their own homes by not being able to use public toilets when they are out enjoying their city. The aim and the aspiration of this council for its citizens is to be prepared for what's coming ahead. We know the government's revenue support grant is disappearing, and therefore we must ensure we are a forward-thinking council with a proactive and ambitious appetite for income generation and business growth to fulfil the promise that we have made to the people of Portsmouth. And that promise, on behalf of my own party, was to transform this seaside city into a 21st century city and establish Portsmouth as an international destination, one which takes control of its own destiny. And that, as I say, has been the pledge of the Conservative Party. I'm now going to turn to the Savings Appendix A in your reports. And in particular, I want to focus on line 17, which is the savings arising from a renegotiation of the waste disposal contract in 2015, £80,000. I'm delighted, and again, this is a Conservative saving, which the Liberal Democrats have sensibly adopted. No criticism whatsoever. But just one comment. In his final comments, Councillor Vernon Jackson, in his introduction speech, gave such adulation to Councillor Dave Ashmore as the Cabinet Member for all that has been done to roll out the recycling and increase recycling across the city. And of course, to make sure that on bin collection days, litter is not scattered across the road because they are now in black wheelie bins. And look, I think that Councillor Dave Ashmore is a fine, upstanding member of this council, but I think it would be remiss of me not to congratulate Councillor Robert New as the Cabinet Member who actually took the decision and implemented such changes to make sure that recycling rates have gone up, to make sure that £80,000 on line 017 is included in the budget, and to also make sure that we don't have litter strewn all across our streets. But I'm delighted that the Liberal Democrats are in sync with the Conservatives and have adopted one of our income generation ideas there. Then we move on to line 006. Lower insurance costs following a change to the contract for the operation of the Mountbatten Centre, £50,000. Absolutely. This administration knew, and particularly our fine former Cabinet Member, Councillor Linda Symes, knew that the way that leisure centre for the people of this city was being run was simply not good enough. And that's why we did not renew the contract with Parkwood Leisure, but instead went out and procured a new contract with BH Live to run that leisure centre. And, you know, the numbers have been spoken about publicly, so I'm not betraying any confidence here, but this council, under a contract agreed by the Liberal Democrats, meant we were paying Parkwood Leisure over £450,000 per year for the pleasure of running our community centre. Now, when we, the Tories, the ones that understand money and can manage risk and are more entrepreneurial, reprocured that contract, we not only reduced that management cost, we completely reversed it, and they're paying us over £250,000 a year now, so you can see almost a combined saving of £700,000. But I'm delighted that the lower insurance of a better operator has meant we've benefited from £50,000 worth of savings again. So well done to Councillor Symes, wherever you may be. Moving on, 007, cultural partnerships. a reduction in the revenue support grant. I support Councillor Pitt here. I think this is a good thing that he's doing. We did it last year, and you know, at the end of the day, this is a beautiful old building. It does need some work. We have got money set aside for that, but the business plan supporting the Guildhall Trust is absolutely vital. Then we move on to 010, the Parks team using the sports pavilions to become responsible for sports attendant duties. This is going to create chaos. And why should we be penalising families, children, people that play Sunday League or Saturday League football for £17,000 a year? This really is a very short-sighted thing to do, and that's why we are also reversing that today. I've already had lots of casework about that, as has Councillor Scott Harris, because I understand that occasionally he plays in some kind of Sunday League football as well. On to saving 031, income from National Commercial Property Investment Fund. Well, there you go. So they're not going to sell the property in the Waitrose or the DHL sorting office or the office block in Manchester, but instead they're going to continue to invest in commercial property and in fact benefit from £244,800 worth of new income. So I shall look forward to the remaining £31 million all being spent within the city boundary, because of course anything outside of that simply would not be acceptable. So I should be looking forward to that. And if there is a proposal to buy something outside of the city boundary that's agreed by the Leader of the Council, Cabinet Member for Pred and the Section 151 officer in delegated authority with Tom Southall, I will be calling it in to make sure that I get justification as to why it's not within the city boundary. Moving on to line 032, deletion of the vacant planning officer post. Well, you know full well that we are planning to remove that because it would be remiss of us not to do so, bearing in mind the state of planning. Moving on to 044, an increased take-off of the salary sacrifice scheme for employees, the additional voluntary contributions to pensions, the AVCs. Good, sensible, great idea, fully encourage that, and I'm pleased that we started that a couple of years ago when we rolled out the marketing of that to staff to make them aware that it was there for them. On to line 055, letting underused civic office space, generating rental income, £40,000. I'm delighted by that one because actually we have generated, I think, just under £1 million worth of new income under the Conservative administration by letting space out to police, probation, to people such as Solent NHS Health Trust. I am slightly concerned though, because I believe that in the business model of Victory Energy, there is rent that they're paying to us for their office space. And of course, now that that business is going to be sold, we may well find that that £40,000 is negated because they will no longer be paying us rent. Nonetheless, I'm pleased also that homelessness was brought up today and that there is going to be a focus, a continued focus, as started by the Conservatives, into homelessness. That's a very good idea. Under the Conservative-led administration, we had the biggest focus on homelessness support that this council has ever seen. Now, when I say ever, look, there could have been periods during the Victorian times or even Edwardian times that we're unaware of, but in living memory, our administration, the Conservatives in this council, were in the privileged position, because we were running the council, of being able to really help people. We put £185,000 into our budget 2 years ago to make sure that there were 40 places per night in this city for homeless people. We did that because we had done regular counts every single night of people that were homeless. And we knew that that ranged from 25 to 32, 33 people. So 40 gave us a buffer zone, because sometimes you have to send someone from one of the establishments in St Mary's Road down to Fratton Road because you have residents who don't get on, and it would be potentially create an antagonistic situation if they were in the same location that evening. So 2 locations, 40 bed, run by Society of St James and the Salvation Army. Brilliant facilities. And I'm delighted that with the former Councillor Paul Godier, Councillor Gemma New, and actually a cross-party working group which involved Councillor Jenny Brent, there was a real sense of rolling your sleeves up, getting stuck into it and understanding the long-term systemic issues. And actually, it's not about a lack of housing. We have enough privately owned flats, rooms in shared houses, council properties to be able to help these people. The issue we very quickly understood wasn't about lack of beds or properties, it was about mental health. Some of these people simply don't want to engage in the services because their mental health has deteriorated so severely that they are not able to make sensible decisions for themselves about how to improve their living position. And that really does break our hearts. So today, rather than using this as an opportunity to say, we're doing so much for homelessness and, we as the Liberal Democrat administration are going to make sure that, the homeless situation is rectified, rather than just acknowledging what we had done as an administration, which was beyond anything that anyone else had ever done before, how about talking about putting that money into mental health support? Because I had sat down and spoken to those charities just before I stopped being leader of the council to say, look, we must be taking the support to them on the street. Go and sit with them in the shop doorway. Befriend them. They might tell you to get lost in a slightly unpleasant way the first 4 or 5 times you go and speak to them. But actually, once you've been back and they recognise your face and they start to trust you, you can then start to work with them on their long-term mental health issues. Because that is the exact way to get these people from where they are now, living in dire situations in the cold winter, into a warm, safe environment, whether that be through supported living or a property of their own. I really do feel very strongly about that, and I think that we must acknowledge there's been cross-party support, but it certainly isn't an opportunity for any one party to pat themselves on the back. We then move on to the money that was set aside for events and the number of events across the city, and I'm delighted that Victoria's has gone from strength to strength. I'm also delighted in the World War I celebrations we had this year, and the fact that through the Conservative administration, thanks to an underspend, we set aside £80,000 in the culture and leisure budget to go towards making sure World War I celebrations this year were really special. So thank you to the Culture and Leisure team and all involved in that. Now, coming to the end of my speech now, Lord Mayor, which I'm sure you'll be pleased about, but we did hear from the Leader of the Council that no one party has a monopoly on how to run the council well. We also heard him say, and I quote, "I'm happy to listen to other parties and all work together." Both things he said today. No one party has a monopoly, I want to work together and I'm happy to listen. Well, here we go. There's no better way of demonstrating listening, collaboration, no monopoly and working together than the decision that this group took to build a council-owned energy company. In just over 11 months from concept to outline business case to full business case, we were able to create Victory Energy Services Limited. Now, the great thing about this company, as well in giving residents great value for money in terms of energy, we were going to be putting the profits from that company back into the local community. We would be building new school places, new playgrounds, new museums potentially, and as well as supporting the most vulnerable through the fuel poverty. Now, today, I am sad that this chamber is not able to be excited about the creation of our new energy company because, unfortunately, the Liberal Democrats didn't act collaboratively. They didn't listen to the majority of councillors in this chamber. A united Labour and Conservative parties and groups on this council both very publicly saying they wanted Victory Energy to continue. I'm appalled by the short-sighted decision, and I'm appalled that members of the Liberal Democrat felt they simply did not have the expertise to be able to manage the moderate amount of risk which had come down following the removal of the energy cap for new entrants and medium-sized energy companies. Now I'm going to turn to our budget amendment itself. How are we going to pay for things? Because I've told you about some of the things that we want to do, our spending, our shopping list, but I haven't told you how we're going to do that. And we are going to pay for what we're going to do by reinstating the investment into Victory Energy Supply Limited. From the 1st of April for the next financial year, that would have generated £325,000, rising to £430,000. How, you might wonder, when it wouldn't be in profit until the end of year 2 and beginning of year 3? Well, that's because of state aid rules. When we borrow money for Victory Energy, £6.2 million, and we lend it to that company so that it's able to work to a position of profit to pay us back, we have to charge them a commercial rent. And that commercial rent, the profit between what we borrow it, let's say we borrow it at 2% and we charge it to them at 3%, hypothetically. The difference that we had calculated through our Treasury management with our Section 151 officer would have generated us £325,000 next year, rising to £430,000 in the 2021 year. And that, Lord Mayor, is how we would have carried out the spending spree that I have spoken to you about today. So, for example, we will be spending £12,000 on 20 additional dog waste collection bins across the city. Now, that includes both the revenue cost of buying them, £150 a bin, and also, the capital cost, and also the revenue cost of emptying them and cleaning them. So a commuted sum that would need to go to COLAS. We also are proposing to set up a new High Street Events Fund. Now, this isn't to pay for staff. We don't want to spend the £120,000 we're proposing on paying for more people to sit in the civic offices. This would be about working with business improvement districts and traders across the city and giving them money, controlled by Mark Pembleton and his team, on actually supporting events themselves. So it might be 4 extraordinary cheese markets that travel over from France once a year, or a wine festival, or something like that that goes into our local high streets to help increase the footfall to support the independent traders. And finally, the parking referendum, £100,000 that would be required for the first year only, because it would be a one-off cost, to hold a parking referendum next year for on the island as phase 1 and off the island for phase 2, because the majority of the parking issues are, in fact, as we know, on the island. Now, the question would be simple. Do you want to live in do you want to have a residence parking zone or not? And if 51% or more of people wanted that, then that is what would happen. And they would be parking zones created roughly on ward boundaries, but of course we need to look at the traffic scrutiny panel report on exactly the best way of taking that forward. But then, Lord Mayor, the great thing is that £100,000, which is spent in year 1 on the referendum, then goes towards the Conservative budget savings for next year. So we are already working as an administration, working as a party in opposition to put money aside for next year in the apprehension that we may become the administration again at some point. So finally, Lord Mayor, I would like to thank all of the staff across the City Council who put up with us councillors, who work very hard for us, who give their all to public service, working for this beautiful, amazing, aspirational unitary authority at Portsmouth City Council. I'd like to place in particular thanks to Chris Ward and Julian Pike for their support in creating this budget amendment 2019-20. So formally, Lord Mayor, I formally propose the Conservative amendment to the Portsmouth City Council budget 2019-20.
And is that formally seconded?
Seconded, Lord Mayor.
Thank you much. And if we could circulate it while Councillor Elcombe enters the chamber, please. And if you could just let us know if you have any interest, Councillor Elcombe.
I have nothing to declare, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. Okay, members, as the leader of the Labour Group is unable to attend the meeting, I understand there's a proposal that standing orders be waived so that Councillor Smythe is allowed to speak on behalf of the Labour Group leader with unlimited speaking time when speaking to revenue budget proposals. This request has the support of the Labour Group leader. Do I have formal proposal and seconder to waive standing order 38? Councillor Ben Jackson? Seconded. And Councillor Jones. Thank you much. Is that agreed? Agreed. Okay. One objection. I now call upon Councillor Smythe to... Not at this point yet, no.
The vote's been taken.
No. I now call upon Councillor Smythe to respond on behalf of the Labour Group without a time limit. Any amendments will need to be proposed and seconded and given to me in writing before the amendment is discussed further or put to the meeting.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor, and thank you very much for proposing and seconding that I stand in Stephen's stead on this possibly momentous day for our government. My general theme is about ambition and about the fact that reading this budget, and indeed, although I support most of the content of the opposition amendment, I just do think we're being very unambitious, and I don't see any reflection in any of the budget papers of the true state of the nation that we have in front of us. I make no apology for the consistency of the themes I'm going to outline in the Labour Group's response to the budget today. From me and my party, consistency, which we show always in our belief in Portsmouth public services and our gratitude and respect of officers advising us, our belief that we need a city which works for the many and not just the few, and our fundamental belief that well-delivered public services are the best route to social justice for all. Yet again, we meet in this chamber to agree a budget overshadowed by disproportionate cuts to local government, a deeply unfair distribution mechanism which sees our city further disadvantaged. This year, the government's budget is late again. There's no indication that the promises they made to end austerity, and yet again will be unable to invest in valuable local frontline services. Although a little bit of me thinks perhaps that could even change within the next 2 or 3 weeks. And against this backdrop of continued austerity from central government at this stage and an ideological drive to shrink the state, which is an assault on our city's values of progress, fairness and inclusion. Lord Mayor, as a Labour Group, we're happy to offer praise where praise is due. And there are things we commend this administration for doing, and indeed the previous administrations. Starting to tackle problems of air pollution and greening the city is vital. Continuing to promote Portsmouth as an international destination and hosting world-class events is very commendable. Strong cross-party work on the much-needed sea defences is essential. Using technology to respond to demand for services and maintenance of service is sensible. Maintaining a broad leisure and culture offer for the city's residents and visitors is good. Beginning to modernise social care to put more resources into effective prevention and help people live independently for longer, supporting people to live in their own lives by doing with them, not doing unto, is necessary. But the unavoidable fact is that everything that's been done in our city has to be set against the actions of a government opposed to essential public services. Cutting local council funding by over 40% in recent years, which is nearly 100 million of cuts here, amounting to 5.88 billion between 2000 and 2020 across the UK. Never before have we seen such an assault on public services. In my long career, I have always found some of the best people working to solve problems and improve people's lives in local government and the NHS. And I feel desperately sad and worried that these cuts are so seriously reducing our capacity locally and nationally to rise to the challenges that face our country in the near future. Brexit, if it happens, will only make this worse, with even more talented people leaving public service and leaving the UK. And let's remind ourselves of the challenges we need to tackle. Let's look beyond the city boundaries just for a moment. The challenges we need to tackle include absolutely terrifying deterioration in the global and local environment. Enormous, obscene gap between rich and poor across the world, here resulting in the recent UN report that found us to have significant numbers of children growing up in poverty. Indeed, they used the word destitution. And I met, which is a sad disgrace for us all, I met a constituent of mine living near me who's had a long history of public service, and she said it made her physically sick to read that report, and I think that's absolutely sums up the right reaction. And here I do commend the second deputation we had today, highlighting the appalling statistics about Charles Dickens Ward. When I worked in public health here in the city, we put a lot of effort into closing that mortality gap, and the fact it has got worse is a terrible indictment on us all. Back to our major challenges. We've got increasing numbers of elderly people living longer with serious disabilities and serious long-term medical conditions. Fewer young people and families able to dream of ever owning a home of their own. And increasing numbers of people in low-paid and temporary employment with little chance of finding jobs in which they can be trained and promoted and have some hope for the future. There are also serious skills shortages in health and social care, engineering and vital trades. And increasing numbers of children with learning and physical disabilities and autism, and a frightening rise in mental illness, particularly in young people, particularly in young women, which is going to affect us into the future. We've got rising pressures on local businesses from a failed business rates system, rising rents and competition from online business, who pay relatively little local tax and use robots rather than well-trained workforce. I mean, these are huge challenges, and I didn't find any evidence in any of the things I had today that we're putting our head above the parapet to recognise that. And I know we're in a very difficult situation. All of those things result in more people living in poverty and anxiety, and more family needing support from the state, as indeed the UN has found. It becomes a vicious circle, and this budget doesn't do enough to pave the way for future success. I don't think it's ambitious enough. A clear example of this is the Victory Energy Company. I'm not going to go on about that, but it's a project well supported by the Cabinet's professional advisors and external consultants, which clearly match the administration's strategy for income generation and its green policies, which full council had welcomed and agreed unanimously in previous full council meetings. Yet the administration decided to sell it, demonstrating, I think, a sad lack of ambition and confidence and forward thinking. It's just an example. At this time, we need brave action rather than words, matched by strong, sometimes cross-party leadership if we're to be ready for the challenges ahead. And it is a time of record failures in our country, and I know lots of us will be depressed about that in our home conversations. But these are failures which will multiply if Brexit goes through. It's a time when economic growth is the lowest since 2010, with growth now revised down, productivity revised down, and business investment revised down. A young colleague, a student who helped us, a local Portsmouth student who helped us last year in our campaign, sent a amusing, I suppose, but also rather sad email the other day to say that he'd checked on the price of some food he was buying in a supermarket. He mentioned a loaf of bread, and by the time he got to the checkout point, in sterling terms, it had gone down, and the loaf he carried out was worth about 20% more. This is the effect of our economy isn't just being felt here. It is a time when the Tories are giving those at the top tax breaks, and I think this is something fundamentally we have to tackle, while a record 7.4 million people in working households are in poverty. It's a time when the Tories in government have failed on the deficit. They promised to eradicate it 2015, 16, 17 and 2020, only to have missed these targets. Yet the damaging policy of austerity, punishing local councils, remains. And time after time, my Lord Mayor, we know it's the poorest areas which are hit the hardest. Those councils, like ours, that are most in need that suffer the most. And I think there's no let-up in sign of the government's determination to penalise Portsmouth and the Solent area, particularly the two cities, Portsmouth and Southampton. What became of the Solent deal, or the Minister of Portsmouth? When will our schools get the resources they desperately need? When will the Tories finally fix social care funding? This is something that's been on central government's agenda for almost within my living memory, but certainly in the last 10 years. We have to look at funding that respects the relative difference in wealth of people receiving social care. And when will the government give our city the much needed money for infrastructure projects to ensure growth and innovation in our local economy? And the response in last month's budget? Not a penny extra for Portsmouth. One or two little bits, I grant you, but not really anything that fundamentally helps us. And that leads us to today's budget. There are things in the budget before us which on the face of it appear sensible. Finding ways to deliver services more effectively and cheaply has our support. And there are some other aspects of the savings that we find are the sorts of things that I recognise that we would do as well. But there are many assumptions and leaps of faith in the indicative saving proposals, and we require a little bit more assurance about some of those things. We objected to the Conservative budget cuts this time last year. Although I wasn't here, I've read all the papers, and note that some of the items now listed as savings by the current administration are some of those we suggested last year. We now suggest, as we did last year, that the Leader of the Council consider making some further savings. Actually, Donna, we think it's about £40,000 to £50,000 a year by starting the process needed to move to all-out four-year elections. We need the administration to give us more reassurance on some of the savings in the paper and also consider whether or not the MTFS approach, now in its fourth year, is still the right one. So first, some of our concerns about the savings listed. And these are concerns and questions for the administration. We're not going to put up an amendment about these things, but we will need more clarity before we get to final approval, which I'm sure we can get through some working with you and some consideration, obviously, when the budget comes back in February. So first, I appreciate the Leader of the Council's assurances about Edinburgh House and Hilsey Lodge and the cuts to adult social care. And I want to endorse the concerns raised by Unison in their welcome deputation as well. We do welcome the plans to rebuild Edinburgh House to add to and improve the accommodation for people with dementia who cannot live independently. But we would like more assurance that the £50,000 savings identified there are not the result of delay in building works or the result in using agency staff expensively in the interim. So we would like to also know that sufficient capital has been allocated to enable the building work to start during 2019 so that we can maximise the operation and the efficiency of the whole transfer and avoid redundancies, of course, and avoid using expensive agency staff in the interim. Longer term, actually, we want to invest in domiciliary care of a very high quality and very flexible to meet people's needs, using well-trained staff who are paid a living wage and are well-trained and able to respond to individual needs flexibly, whilst we do acknowledge the need for residential care for people with dementia and very high care needs. Staying with social care, we would like more reassurance about the savings that are to be made from the review of high-cost care packages. We support moves to an individual budget approach and helping more people to live more independently. But we also know that there are individuals with very high needs in Portsmouth and do not want to see their standard of living and opportunities decline due to these cuts or to these cuts being made in an insensitive way. Regarding income and looking here at the Conservative Party budget proposals, many of which we would support in overall terms, as we've said before, our policy is to develop and implement a whole city approach to parking in the context of an ambitious integrated transport policy for the city. And if this were introduced, perhaps some income could be larger than anticipated in the report. We would support the idea of having a whole city approach to it, but we're not sure that starting with the cost of a survey is the answer. I think we want to look at an integrated and ambitious long-term integrated transport system for the city, linked up with a whole city approach to parking. And we're very happy to discuss that in the coming months. Moving away from specifics, and last but by no means least, is the build-up of deficits on the Children and Families budget. At this moment in time, the Cabinet is in a good position to judge whether this budget for this important work is at the right level. We think you've got plenty of evidence that it's not. We've had a good Ofsted on all counts to which many congratulations and to all who worked on that. And therefore we have knowledge that Portsmouth remains one of the smallest spenders on budget per head of population compared with most other authorities, and that we're doing most of the right things to keep children safe from harm. Even though that we know we have a very needy population and large numbers of families living in poverty. Despite the extra funding of, I think, 2.4 million promised from government and the reduction and the use of revenue reserves, we would like the Cabinet to consider, and this isn't an amendment, so we'd just like to have further conversations and reassurance about this, delaying no longer to rebase this budget by providing an extra, say, 2 million with a view to reducing the cumulative deficit considerably by the end of the coming financial year. In addition, we want the Cabinet to redouble its efforts to get government to fund the cost of care for unaccompanied minors, which has enormously increased to nearly 1 million. And Stephen Morgan MP has already written to the Minister on this matter and will of course continue to press for additional funding on that. Unless we have a new government which will act quickly to put an end to austerity, and without support from income generation initiatives such as Vessel, reducing the cumulative deficit in children and families can probably only be done by making savings elsewhere in the PCC budget or raising council tax. Neither of those are particularly palatable, and I understand that that's a difficult thing. But given the support for children's services, children's social care, evidenced in the public consultation, we would like to urge the administration to consider the option of raising council tax by a further 1.52% if additional funding cannot be found from elsewhere or from government. Being able to look after children and families is fundamentally important if we want to avoid a whole cohort of children and young people from missing out on opportunities to contribute positively to the future of our city. This is an investment in the best possible sense of the word. Investing in children's futures is really so important for coming generations here. Surely it's something we cannot afford not to do, given the downstream costs of failure. I've got a lot of figures about this from my previous work. And if we fail children in early years, then there's a multiplier of costs for the public purse in 10, 20, 30 years that will be simply unsustainable. So to this end, we'll be working up our plans, and we're happy to have conversations with across the council about these matters, and we hope that we can all put Portsmouth before party and support a consensus budget. And we ask for this support because we believe it's time we put ambition at the heart of this council. Blindly accepting government intentions without being ambitious for an alternative would condemn Portsmouth to demise and decline, and we can't accept that. We've got to be ambitious for Portsmouth, now more than ever, and that ambition will need to be translated into training and employment and helping to make this a thriving city. Job creation as a route to social justice has always been a vital part of the city's identity. The more we can grow our economy in Portsmouth and the Solent area, the more we can invest through locally raised funds in our important public services. And we don't see yet, and maybe it's there and we just haven't seen it, evidence of that thinking behind the administration's budget. Only then can we guarantee a long-term future for decent and effective social care and invest in schools, making clear our commitment to reduce poverty and support our most needy and vulnerable residents. And so we urge the administration to do all it can to support social care in the city, education, and end the government's disregard for elderly and vulnerable people, and make it clear to our city that Portsmouth cares for those in need. And we do therefore expect the administration to do as they've indicated they're moving towards, to cut the cost of democracy, reduce senior management costs, push harder for closer working with others in the voluntary community and public sector, and share more of our services with neighbouring local authorities. The only way we can act as a council, we as a council can adapt to our future, given the list of really big things we will have to face in the future, is to work with our citizens to gain support and consent to innovation and change. So we must work with everybody, be open through consultation, and seek every opportunity to get the best for Portsmouth in consultation and working with our residents. And we'll stand up to government for our city. It'll be at the frontier of what local government is doing and can achieve in the most difficult of circumstances. People are tired, fed up and angered about the scale of cuts we've suffered in recent years, and I don't think this kind of quite measured approach that we've got at the moment, salami slicing, isn't working for us anymore. We're looking for a change, a forward-looking city, leading the way, perhaps in uncharted territory, reinventing the ways things are done and improving vital local services. We feel so angry about the cuts, and we're in a privileged position, being a small group here, that we will almost certainly be abstaining from decision-making today, because this is unpalatable to us to be doing. And I just hope that by raising these much wider issues and the question of ambition for the Council, we'll be in a better position to agree and to look at what comes up in the budget in February. My Lord Mayor, this sort of ambition is what the people of Portsmouth deserve.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smythe. I've had a few people messaging me saying they would appreciate a short break now. Just looking at the chamber, really, do we have a... There's no... 10 minutes, so you can also check with your parties, see if they're in support of any of the amendments. Okay, we'll be back in by the chimes of 1:45, so 15 minutes. Thank you very much. Okay. Please be seated. We've had apologies given in by Councillor Chowdhury. He's had to leave for the rest of the meeting due to work commitments. So the debate is now open. No speakers, is it? Our first speaker, Councillor Fielding.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. My main concern with the budget put forward to us today relates to the substantial cuts to the adult social care system in the city at a time when, as we've heard from the deputation from our representative from Unison, demand on the system is not decreasing as we're led to believe, but is in fact increasing. The fact that the government's own green paper on social care has been further delayed until January 2019 at the earliest shows the contempt that this government holds those in need of social care most. Given the current state of national politics, it's not impossible to imagine that we could shortly have a Labour government, which would genuinely put an end to austerity. So where does that leave us in Portsmouth? Age UK's research has shown that 1 in 5 older people have recently missed meals. 32% of unpaid older carers said that they were unable to take a break from caring. 1 in 4 people had to get hospital treatment because of a failing care system. 42% of older carers feel lonely and isolated. Age UK Portsmouth said, the figures show how badly our underfunded social care system is failing people when they most need support. In Portsmouth and Gosport, we have 62,184 older people living with long-term health problems such as diabetes, health disease and dementia. Far too many people are struggling to do the basics, such as getting out of bed, getting dressed or going to the toilet because they lack vital support. Many people have to rely on frail and elderly family or friends for help because they have nowhere else to turn. This can put enormous strain on people at an already difficult time in their lives, especially for older carers. These additional responsibilities can seriously affect their own health and be very isolating. The current system isn't fit for purpose. We have to do better. Can we therefore at this time afford to cut £966,000, nearly £1 million out of the health and social care budget, which would inevitably mean further reductions in the number and quality of domiciliary care packages for vulnerable adults living at home? And for those most in need of care, is now the right time to redevelop 2 of the city's care homes, or should we be investing in more and better domiciliary care? I agree that the city desperately needs extra care housing with dementia facilities for those living at home in need of respite or the security of having someone on hand 24 hours a day to help with those in need, but should this be done at the expense of our existing care homes within the city? This continuation of this austerity-led programme to cuts to vital services is now biting at the very bones of those we must protect the most in society, and I cannot reconcile myself to consider voting for such measures that may harm some of the most vulnerable people within the city at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fielding. I now call on Councillor Ferret.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll start with the Labour amendment, given that we've just heard from Councillor Fielding and just before that from Councillor Smythe, and absolutely astonished that we had no amendment. So we've heard the sound and fury, the wringing of hands about the cuts that are taking place, with no amendment, no alternative proposals. We know as councillors we are working within certain constraints in terms of the money available and in terms of council tax, but nevertheless, certainly in my time, the Labour group, we always tried to look for money and were able to find some in order to make suggestions to try and alleviate some of the cuts, not least in social care. But we have a Labour group that put forward no amendment whatsoever. And that is absolutely astonishing. I think the people that voted for them and put them here need to know about that. They've put them here to do a job in order to try and construct a budget or to come up with suggestions, not least for their constituents and residents, about how they can improve matters or how they can ameliorate the cuts, and they put forward nothing at all. Yet they are the group that voted to put the current administration in power. At the very least, this budget is their budget and they need to own it, and they should be going out and arguing about why it's justifiable. If they feel that strongly that it isn't, then what are they going to do about the Liberal Democrats who they put in power? And I don't see them coming forward with any suggestions about votes of no confidence, for example, saying that they're no longer fit to be the council. So again, the approach to abstain when you have put that administration in and they have come up with a budget, again, seems to me somewhat cowardly. In terms of Councillor Smythe, I commend her for being here to put forward her speech. Clearly, we do not have the group leader here once again. I wanted to talk in when standing orders were being set aside, because I think it's a disgrace and I think it's a disservice to the people of Portsmouth. We have someone who's paid an allowance to be a leader of a political group who is never here, despite his hashtag from here for here. He's never here, from here but not here. And yet the people of Portsmouth are paying him extra money for those responsibilities, and it completely abrogates those responsibilities. And again, I think the people of Portsmouth need to know about that. And Councillor Chowdhury's not here. He has my condolences. I understand he's been deselected for his seat, and he's to be replaced by Momentum. Hard left Momentum are going to be replacing Councillor Chowdhury, someone who's dutiful, is always here and turns up for meetings, and yet he is the one being deselected. Labour's only proposals seem to be to spend billions of pounds more in order to try and address the crisis we have in public finances. And we all know that is not a credible approach, and it's not going to work. In terms of the administration's proposals, they seem very sensible to me in terms of what's being proposed. Clearly, we have been through a very painful process over the last 7 or 8 years. I can recall a budget here of £17 million being cut. That was at the time the council leader was the 22nd most important Liberal Democrat and had his hotline to Nick Clegg, and he couldn't do anything then to lessen the cuts, because we all knew they were being driven very much by government, and I suppose in part by necessity. And at that time, Labour's policy was to reduce the deficit by 50%, and as I've said here before, lo and behold, that is what the government actually achieved. So Labour can go on about how they were opposed to the cuts, but that was their policy in effect being enacted. In terms of the deputies, I thought Mr Tier spoke very well from Unison. I think he made very forceful points about how the ongoing cuts are impacting upon the most vulnerable in the community. Nevertheless, I can understand the proposals that are being put forward and were spoken about by the council leader in terms of the closure of the care homes. I'll contrast that with Mr Burgess. What we had there was clearly the hard left rhetoric of the SWP. I know Mr Burgess is keen on selling his Socialist Workers' Party papers, because I once kicked him out of the Labour Party meeting for doing it. So that's what we had from Mr Burgess, and it was quite ironic he spoke about Sure Start and the cuts that have been enacted on Sure Start, because Sure Start was funded and set up by that neoliberal devil Tony Blair. The sort of person that Alan Burgess will castigate over the years. He was the one that invested in Sure Start at that time. The Conservative budget, I'll just touch on that. And again, I can agree with the amendment that's been put forward, not least because it shows the folly of the Victory Energy decision. We have to find alternative sources of income in this council. We are facing huge challenges ahead, not least Brexit, and I agree with everything the council leader says about Brexit. We know that is an absolute disaster. You only have to look at what's going on in the House of Commons. But what's it going to do to Portsmouth? Portsmouth is really in the eye of the Brexit storm in terms of when it arrives here, and yet what is happening in Westminster is absolute chaos. But by the same token, the former council leader makes a good point in terms of reserves, that we need to be prepared for that. We need to have some cushion as to when that hits us, and spending reserves is never a good idea. You can only spend them once.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ferret. I now call upon Councillor Lyon, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I've looked closely at the resources part of the Lib Dems budget, and I can't find the stables and the tonnage of hay required for the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse that are going to arrive in April, apparently, after we fantastically leave the EU. But I did find in that resources budget, part of the Director of Finance and Information Technology, were 4 items, 050, 051, 052 and 053, which represent a saving of £276,000. This is out of a £5.7 million budget, and as many people know, I think that we spend massively on IT for very little return. For example, we're sitting here and hardly any of us can get access to internet of any speed at all, bearing in mind that we're paying an enormous amount for the pipe to come down. It's quite clear that our IT is not fit for purpose, and I will probably get some letters from the IT department watching this, as I do generally whenever I talk about them. But what is interesting is we're looking at transition to cloud-based software, applications consolidation to move to a core product set, various other things. This is technology that's 8 years old. And if we're saying that we could have saved 118,000 for transition for only partly to cloud-based software now, bear in mind the number of posts that have been deleted, particularly in things like child psychotherapy, which we have now lost in this city, unbelievably, considering that babies and their parents need as much help as possible in order to be able to participate in society properly if they've had a bad start. It is amazing to me that we are squandering huge amounts of money on bad IT, badly put together and badly delivered to the council, when we could have saved an enormous amount by going to cloud a long time ago, by actually being able, for example, to be able to communicate with each other in a council chamber through our laptops, which of course we can't do because the pipe isn't working properly. And we've got 2 pipes, actually. One of them is, as far as I understand, about a year ago, one of them wasn't working, we're still paying for it. I think that we need somebody in resources to look very closely at what we are spending on IT and what we are getting from it. And for 3.5 years I've been saying the same thing, unsurprisingly with very little result. It just seems to me that we're spending a lot of money, we're not getting the service we require, and ultimately we could make a lot more in terms of savings by actually moving to the cloud wholesale. And I know officers themselves are frustrated by this, because actually we are almost in a 19th century society here when we should be looking at 21st century technology. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lyon. I now call upon Councillor Stubbs, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm a little surprised, actually, to be speaking this early on, because when we have a council budget debate, there are normally a large number of speakers. There's normally a genuine debate. From our side, Councillor Donna Jones has introduced our position on it, and I was, from my angle, I guess I was intending to respond to points made by the administration, but there haven't been any points made by the administration. I find it quite strange that we're not having a debate on the budget, and that other members have evidently decided, perhaps under the force of the whip, not to contribute towards what we're doing today. The context of this budget, of course, is not just the savings requirement, it's also the level of overspend. And forgive me, I can't find the right paragraph, but there is mention in there about how, in effect, the children's social care overspend is now of such a significant magnitude that it will increase savings requirement in future years. So Councillor Smythe may get her wish for the children's social care budget to go up, but the cost of that will be other budgets going down. And I find that a very worrying thing, and I think that's something really, for members on this side, we would like reassurance or even just information about the situation in children's social care. Why is the overspend as bad as it is? Now, I know we have budget reports, but of course the information on those is quite superficial, and it is difficult to figure out on that what is driving the overspend in the way that it is, but it is very significant and much worse than we've ever seen before, double the level where it was in May, and a similar position in adults as well. What I really do want to talk about is about one thing in our proposal, in the Conservative amendment, and that is residence parking. Because the history of residence parking, and I'm sure many of the people in this chamber are aware, dates back a long time, but there was particular problems in 2013-14 when the then Liberal Democrat administration brought in the MB and MC zones. And these zones were done in, I thought at the time, a completely faultless way. They didn't recognise natural boundaries and natural communities. In fact, they seemed to follow ward boundaries. And they didn't take any account of car ownership and so forth. MB was absolutely absurd. MB had 1,300 parking spaces, but because student vehicles overwhelmingly were registered elsewhere, and that is a area of very high student population, only 800 permits were issued. So even if everyone was at home at once, which is inconceivable, you would still find 40% of the spaces empty. Now, that was a disaster at the time, and it caused massive knock-on problems, as was predicted by people at the time, including myself. And here we are, 4 or 5 years later, and we're witnessing exactly the same process. That the Liberal Democrats' proposal is to put those zones in the same way as before, and you know, I mentioned this in the portfolio decision meeting. What are the numbers of the permits which are likely to be available in MB and MC? Because it is not difficult to see that exactly the same thing is going to happen. So I am concerned at the knock-on effect that this is going to have. It's going to spread outwards from there. You've got, without MB and MC, basically you've got zones on residence parking that are more or less defensible. But you can't incrementally expand from that. If you're going to have MB and MC, you're going to have to create more and more and more and more and more, working your way through Eastney, working your way through Milton, through Southsea, up the east side of the city. And each time you create a new zone, you'll be moving more and more cars to the ones just outside the zone. What residents face, but I know a lot of residents who don't want residence parking, but that's not a choice which is available to them under this Liberal Democrat administration. The choice is to have residence parking in a planned way, which is why we put in this referendum, or to have it in a chaotic way, to basically be told, look, you know, you have a choice. You can not have residence parking, or you can have all of the city's third cars and student vehicles dumped outside your front door. And this sort of loaded gun principle of diplomacy is what people are going to face. Now, we need to move away from that. I've been saying for a long time that we need a strategy, and there's one that indeed was partly worked up through the scrutiny panel. And of course, as we know, the administration didn't even have the decency to wait for that publication to be published. They don't even know what is in it, but it hardly matters because it's decisions first and then consultations second. So we are put into our amendment having a residence parking referendum in order that this can be done in a sensible way. I'm saying to people who don't want residence parking, I'm afraid that's not a choice the Liberal Democrats are going to give you. They're going to give you mayhem and residence parking, or we're going to try to steer them away from that and bring about this in a more structured way, and I hope the leader will listen.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stubbs. Councillor Young, do you have any interest to declare?
Lord Mayor, sorry for being late. No, I do not have any pecuniary interests.
Okay, thank you very much. Since we have no other speakers indicated, I pass over to Councillor Byrne Jackson to sum up, please.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor, and thank you for the debate. I think it's been interesting, and I'd like to address... It's been an interesting discussion, and I think I'd like to see if we can address some of the issues here. So I think so some of the things from the Conservatives I think are worth looking through. In terms of social care, I think there is a definite conversation that we need to have about how we make sure that the plans for the extra care sheltered accommodation at Edinburgh House and Hilsey Lodge are worked through with people so that people understand what is going on and to understand about the extra provision that that's going to bring within the city. So I agree with them for that. In terms of a planning officer, I understand that from looking at this, that we want an extra planning policy officer, so not somebody to do planning applications, so nothing to do with anybody having a problem about having their planning application looked at, completely unconnected, and I'm disappointed that that wasn't made clear to people. In terms of sports pitches, colleagues, when we go to a meeting in a room, there's a sign that says, please make sure that you put the room back in the way that you would like to have seen it when you arrived. This is what we're trying to do with sports. We're asking people to put the corner flags out themselves and take them away at the end of the game. It doesn't seem to me to be an unreasonable thing to do. In terms of income generation, I'm really pleased the City Council has looked through an income generation strategy. It's widened what the Council can look at, and that's given us the ability to come here today to say that we are looking at investing £1 million to buy housing so that we've got places for people who are homeless to live, and to work with the voluntary sector, work with local charities to be able to give people the support to make sure those tenancies a success. Now, I'm disappointed that was rejected last year, but because we now have this here, and at the budget meeting you voted it down, it was part of our proposal. So I'm pleased that we're able to do that now. So my Lord Mayor, the stuff about the parking zones is interesting. I think the proposal here is that anybody can go and park in Old Portsmouth. Everybody in the residence car parking zones at the moment, when they were given the option to get rid of them, they said they wanted to keep them, and that seems to work. So our view is about saying to residents in your area, what works for you? We're not going to impose things that you don't want on you. We're not going to take things away that you want. So under the Conservatives, we've had people wanting residence car parking zones having their zones taken away, and local people being ignored. Now, I think that's not so good. My Lord Mayor, I think the Labour Party have come up with some sensible things that we need to look through. I completely agree with them that the cost of the unaccompanied minors into the city on children's social care is not acceptable. That there's probably about £1 million of spend that we're having to pick up here that should be picked up by government. Now, I'm really pleased that because of the work Rob Wood has done, Oxfordshire has now volunteered to take 10 kids and to look after them. Well, that's what at least the Cabinet Member for Children's Social Care did when he was down. I understand his director had some horror in his eyes, so we'll see what happens when they got back to Oxford. But I think the issue of children's social care budget is crucial. If we can make sure that that budget is sustainable and right, the rest of the council finances have a good chance of working well. And we need to work together to be able to address that. Now, that might mean that for a while we need to put in additional funding to be able to turn it round so that it becomes to a sustainable level. And I think that's something that we will all want to work with and want to do. So my Lord Mayor, I think there are some difficult decisions here. I think we would all want to have more money for the council to be able to use, but we have to work within what we've got. My personal view about the adult social care changes is that it'll mean that we've got a better service, providing services that are respectful for people in their old age, instead of having people in institutions. And I think we need to learn from the changes that have happened in this city that we've successfully done over the last few years, under all administrations. So I'm very happy to work together with anybody and everybody on that, because it seems to me that's the right thing to do. My Lord Mayor, this is a set of proposals that tries to make sure that we balance the budget. We will be coming back to the council in February with the capital budget as well, so that we've got the whole system together. I do take on the proposal from Councillor Donna Jones, that there is potentially 300,000 from Victory available to us. But to do that, the council has to take on £7.3 million worth of debt. So the figures from the Director of Finance is 7.3, and I'm happy to trust that figure. So, my Lord Mayor, my view is that we should not be taking on that additional level of debt. So I think, Lord Mayor, this is a sensible budget. I'm happy to commend it to colleagues as a working document that feeds through into the budget that we will all look at in February. Chris clearly thinks we've finished as he's picked up all his papers and is about to leave. So, my Lord Mayor, I'm happy to commend it and hope that the Council will support the proposals, which I think are sensible proposals, ones we don't want to bring forward because we would all like to spend more money, but ones that are realistic about the finances that we have available. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. We now move to the vote using the recorded vote method as previously notified in accordance with the regulations. We only have one amendment before us, so we start with the Conservative Group amendment, as on the blue papers. If you could stand and then sit down as I call your names, please.
If they're in favour of it.
If you're in favour of it. Okay. Councillor Lyon, Councillor Rob New, Councillor Dave Tompkins, Councillor Weems, Councillor Gemma New, Councillor Neil Young, Councillor Swan, Councillor Ferret, Councillor Elcombe, Councillor Jonas, Councillor Bosher, Councillor Jones, Councillor Stubbs, Councillor Ryan Brent, Councillor Hockaday, Councillor Peter Harris, and if you include myself in that vote. And now all those opposed, please stand. Councillor Hugh Mason, Councillor Vernon Jackson, Councillor Pitt, Councillor Stagg, Councillor Saunders, Councillor Wood, Councillor Smith, Councillor Rob Wood, Councillor Zackley, Councillor Madden, Councillor Dowling, Councillor Purvis, Councillor Winnington, Councillor Jenny Brent, Councillor Horton, Councillor Fuller, Councillor Ashmore, Councillor Udy.
Any abstentions?
Any abstentions?
Any abstentions?
Councillor Coles, Councillor Smythe, Councillor Fielding.
We'll just do that for you.
I think we're all aware of this already, but for the amendment 17, against the amendment 18, abstentions 3, therefore the amendment is lost. We now move on to the substantive.
It's the original capital recommendation.
Which is the original capital recommendation. All those in favour, please stand. Okay. Councillor Hugh Mason, Councillor Vernon Jackson, Councillor Pitt, Councillor Stagg, Councillor Saunders, Councillor Tom Wood, Councillor Smith, Councillor Rob Wood, Councillor Zackley, Councillor Madden, Councillor Dowling, Councillor Purvis, Councillor Winnington, Councillor Jenny Brent, Councillor Horton, Councillor Fuller, Councillor Ashmore and Councillor Udy. And Councillor Ferret. Okay. All those opposed, please stand. Okay, Councillor Elcombe, Councillor Jonas, Councillor Bosher, Councillor Jones, Councillor Stubbs, Councillor Ryan Brent, Councillor Hockaday, Councillor Peter Harris, Councillor Ian Lyon, Councillor Rob New, Councillor Tompkins, Councillor Weems, Councillor Gemma New, Councillor Young and Councillor Swan. And myself. And abstentions, please. and Councillor Coles, Councillor Smythe, Councillor Fielding. Okay. 419 against 16, abstained 3. Therefore, that is now carried, which ends the budget debate and vote. I don't propose we have a break because we've already had one, so moving on swiftly to questions under Standing Order 17. Members, there are 2 questions under Standing Order 17 that have been previously circulated to you. As you know, there is a total of 45 minutes allocated within standing orders to deal with questions. Can I remind everyone that the member asking the original question may ask up to 2 supplementary questions that must arise directly out of the original question. Any other member is limited to 1 supplementary question that must arise directly out to the original question or the replies. Question 1, Councillor Smythe to be answered by Councillor Pitt.
Question 1 in my name.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Smythe for bringing this question today. This has been something that I've been aware of for a while. I have regular meetings with the different cultural organisations in the city as frequently as possible, and a number of them had raised concerns around this particular issue. It was therefore I first met with the appropriate officers back in July and have been working with them since then to work through a policy that does make more sense. I think Michael Lawther will be able to confirm that we have made some progress on this matter. Yes, he can. And that one particular organisation has now received confirmation that an adjustment is possible to accommodate them. We now need to work through this with the Portsmouth Music Festival as well, but we're quite clear that this is something that's happened for a very long time, and it's a situation that perhaps should have been avoided, but nevertheless we are where we are, and we would take further steps to rectify that situation. With reference to the specific organisation in your question, that's somewhat more complex because they are, rather than being an event, they are holding a whole series of events through the year. But since becoming the Cabinet member, I've met with them at the venue on a number of occasions. I've scheduled another meeting in for January. There are a number of things that they need help and support with, and this is one of them. And I've been making sure that they get that support from me and our officer team.
Councillor Smythe, your next supplementary.
I wondered if Councillor Pitt is optimistic of being able to sort this out. I'm particularly had a lot of people in my choir who are involved in the Portsmouth Music Festival who really are upset that they've had to move into Hampshire. And for Portsmouth children that then have to travel out of the city in order to take part in what is chiefly an educational thing rather than anything to do with performing on the stage in the middle of the night. The legislation for this was, after all, about protecting children from harm. It does seem to me that what we're doing is stopping children taking advantage of vocational, educational and opportunities for their lives. Are you optimistic you'll be able to get us at least on a par with surrounding authorities, if not a situation that seems to be more sensible? This is the kind of situation that brings us all into disrepute, I think.
Yes, Councillor Smith, you are completely correct. It is something that is an anomaly that needs to be resolved. I have been in conversations with Michael Lawther a couple of times this week and over the last couple of weeks, particularly on the Portsmouth Music Festival. There was some confusion initially between the Portsmouth Music Festival and the Portsmouth Schools Music Festival. The initial information I had was that it was the Schools Music Festival that was affected. I then made inquiries and they told me that it wasn't. So we subsequently found out that it was the Portsmouth Music Festival that was directly affected. They have not actually contacted me personally. This is something that I've found out through my own investigations. I am aware of it, and we are very confident that we can resolve that situation so that the Portsmouth Music Festival can be in Portsmouth, where of course it absolutely should be.
Councillor Smythe, your next supplement.
What do you suggest I say to my colleagues in the choir when we sing in our Christmas concert at St Thomas's Church at 7:30 this Saturday, and they will ask me about what the result is of this and how they can proceed?
So you can tell them that we are actively working on this to come up with a specific policy that mitigates the difference at the moment between the county and us. This is not just a local issue. Nationally, different authorities interpret the rules in different ways. But as you said earlier on, one of the things that we looked at, for example, was a piece of paper with some guidelines on it, not rules, guidelines, from the NSPCC. And my response to the officers was, exactly as you suggested, that this is a document from the National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. There is nothing about offering a cultural experience to children which is in any way cruel. That is meant to protect against child performers being exploited in professional productions primarily. Unfortunately, as is so often the case with legislation, the wording is poor and it's not specific enough. The actual piece of legislation itself was so badly worded that a whole different consultation had to take place and a whole load of supplementary advice applied to it to give some steer to local authorities, but there are holes in that as well, and I've started to challenge that process. So please tell them we will get there. Now that I know that we have a mechanism in place to make that work, we'll get in contact with them and we'll make sure that their appearance in Ferrum is their one and only touring experience and they can return to a residency in Portsmouth straight away.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. No more supplementaries, therefore I move on to question 2 from Councillor Coles to be answered by Councillor Ashmore.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Question 2 in my name.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. To answer that, we've got a community warden team that have been addressing issues with street drinking and drug misuse, although that is largely with adults. It does affect youth things as well across the city there. And they're carrying out patrols in the area. They would encourage residents to report issues they see to the police or phone 101 as it's a police matter if they catch someone doing antisocial behaviour, and it's a crime, of course. The community team can be contacted on 0800 085 3840 or safecleantidy at portsmouthcc.gov.uk for low-level antisocial behaviour. They can also advise residents too on who to contact for their specific issue. There's 7 public space CCTV cameras monitored in the Fratton area, and there's 142 across the city there. And with regard to youth antisocial behaviour across the city, there are a number of providers of diversionary programmes you've probably heard of, like Motivate, the Prince's Trust, Pompey in the Community, Active Communities Network. The community wardens and youth teams can work with to target specific issues in local areas there. There's a youth club in Charles Dickens Centre on Lake Road that has open access youth provision, including daytime provision for those who are neat. The club is well attended, does provide a service for young people living in Fratton. Just because it's not in the Fratton ward doesn't mean that people can't go to and from the things, like people coming from out of the ward into the Kingston Rec and to the Adventure Park in Charles Dickens there. And as you've probably heard, there will be additional community wardens patrolling the housing stock areas in the evenings from early next year, and they will continue to draw in support from other agencies to deal with issues they encounter. So other additional community wardens will continue to patrol areas of high demand and work with the neighbourhood policing teams and partners to resolve issues. There's a multi-agency group working on issues with youths in the central sector of the city. Portsmouth Police have a standing agenda item on our district tasking and planning meeting, chaired by the district commander, to identify and consider areas for targeting patrols to tackle antisocial behaviour under Operation Bourne. Those rotate regularly depending on the reports and the evidence, and the police work in partnership with housing, wardens, adult services, children's services, third-party organisations and local businesses to identify and tackle these issues. And of course, as ward councillors, we can be eyes and ears as well when people report things to us. I mean, your question's very pertinent when you put it in, but of course there was that attack here in Warmer Road as well, which was related to youth offenders, but yeah, hopefully that can answer that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cole, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Does the Cabinet Member agree that the lack of lighting in areas such as Kingston Rec contributes as it acts as an area of congregation for youths?
Having no light anywhere can be a sign, it can be a bit, intimidating for people, or it can be a place where you can hide and do stuff like that. As you've probably heard, we've got, we're planning a cafe to go in there, to make it more of a community thing, make it more of a thing where people can go, break a generational boundary down. But it just provides that additional support there for the antisocial behaviour that was happening there before. we put off with that, so we'll have a cafe there rather than that. You know what I mean? But yes, I will agree and empathise with the original point there.
Thank you much. And do you have a final supplementary, Councillor
Last one. Does the Cabinet Member agree that cuts to youth services could contribute to, or have contributed in the past, to the rise in antisocial behaviour?
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Peter Harris, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Following the capital budget last year, Councillor Ashmore, I think you will remember that the Conservatives put in some provisions for the allotments for cameras and such. What I'd like to ask you is, can you update me on what is happening regarding antisocial behaviour at the Horsey Lane allotments in Hilsey?
I can't update you actually in detail on any of that. I'm not prepared for that one, but I can find out for you and have it written to you and distributed to you, Councillor.
Okay, thank you much. Councillor Robert New, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Would the Cabinet Member agree with me that the community wardens continue to provide superb service in tackling antisocial behaviour across the city, from Portsmouth right the way down to the bottom of Southsea, and that we should place on record our continued thanks to them for their continued work?
Wholeheartedly, Councillor New.
Councillor Ferret.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I heard Councillor Ashmore talking about multi-agency working and how that can be effective, and we saw evidence of that in our ward in Paulsgrove when we had persistent problems at the Hillside Club. And actually, I was really impressed with how the various parts of the council, the police, other agencies came together with residents as well, because we held a couple of residents' meetings there as well, and how they all came together to actually resolve that. So I think we hear, by definition, a lot of negativity around antisocial behaviour, but it does show working together can deliver results. I suppose my question is, and it follows on from Councillor Coles about the youth service, but given the police are really stretched, and I know they're struggling to turn up to residents' meetings in the ward at the moment, what are we seeing in terms of, how is that impacting in terms of antisocial behaviour, and are we seeing a marked increase because of the lack of police?
Again, Councillor Ferret, I lack the detail on every single thing on that one, but obviously the police service is stretched. It's difficult for them because they've got to prioritise different areas when there's assault going on, as opposed to things like graffiti on a wall. It's really tough for them. But I would encourage with your beat teams there to meet up with them as ward councillors. You can be eyes and ears on that one. But yes, they are stretched. And I think they do an extremely good job, and I'm hoping that the extra community wardens that we've got going can actually help them with their job with things like low-level, if there is such thing as low-level antisocial behaviour.
Thank you very much. Councillor Vernon Jackson, please.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. First of all, I wonder if you'd agree with me, Councillor Ashmore, that we should record our thanks to Maggie Blythe, who's been running the police in the city and is now moving on, and that if there are questions about allotments, the best thing to do is to address them to the Cabinet Member who looks after allotments, which is Councillor Pitt.
Yes, to the last bit, and yes, I would like to place thanks on record to Maggie Blythe there. It's only known her a short time, but she's done a lot, and she's had a lot of people say good things about her.
Councillor Jones, please.
Thank you very much. Would the Cabinet Member like to place on record his thanks to the previous Conservative administration for putting the £80,000 aside for the allotment CCTV security cameras?
Yeah.
Having no more questions announced. Okay, Frank Jonas.
It's technology from the former Cabinet Member for Resources.
Councillor Frank Jonas, please.
Lord Mayor, I mean, this is obviously a diversion because now I don't know who to talk to, whether it's the councillor for antisocial behaviour or with my friend, the councillor for allotments. But it is quite important, the troubles going on at the allotments because of different
reasons, lack of light, lack of security, could mean that Hillsey are short of scrapes this Christmas.
Blame it on Brexit.
Councillor Ashmore, do you want to respond to that?
Is it a bad thing? Yeah.
Second time, having had no further notice of questions, that brings us to the end of today's meeting. As this is the last meeting of the year, I'd like to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and invite members back to the parlour for some festive refreshments. Thank you very much.